This video is for Stage 8 Informative Explanatory Writing, focusing on writing a description. This is a crossover video. That means that this stage is in the 2nd and 3rd grade writing manual, as well as in the 4th through 6th grade writing manual. Our goal at the end of the 2-3 writing is for children to hit this Stage 8 level. While for the 4th through 6th grade manual, this is where the writing begins. Why is this crossing over for these grade levels? Because we're working at the 1 to 3 paragraph level. This means that we are now having children write either a very well-developed paragraph or we're having them build to the next level, which is 3 paragraphs. So you may have children in your room who are writing 1 to 3 paragraphs once you hit this stage 8, and I already showed you in the stage 7 level as well. So stages 7 and 8 are basically ending the 2-3 informative explanatory writing and beginning at the 4-6 grade level writing manual. If you are in the 2-3 writing manual, we will begin on page 198. If you are in the 4-6 writing manual, we will begin on page 172. We will review all the pages in this section, but before we do, let's talk about what is the purpose of descriptive writing. The reason for descriptive writing is that the author knows their audience needs background, a description about the subject that they are writing about. In other words, if I were writing a book about plants, my first chapter would probably be a description of all the parts of a plant. Then I would go into other information about a plant, its life cycle, what it needs to live, but I always start with a description of my subject. Why? Because if my reader does not know what the subject is, if I go on and give more information, they will be totally lost. So descriptive writing is for you, the writer, to give your audience that background about the subject. In doing so, you're not only going to describe the subject to your reader, but the most important part in a description is to tell the function of the parts of your subject. Again, I were writing a description about a plant, I'm not just going to describe the parts of a plant, I have to tell you the function of the parts. That's what makes it informational. What the function is one of these 4 items. How it works, what it does, why it's important, or what is it. So I'm choosing one of those questions to answer to tell you what the function of that part is. That's the reason why we write a description. The description writing always has a separate stage that you teach it because all 3 parts, the introduction, the body, and the conclusion, are different than other types of informative explanatory writing. The introduction is going to be a definition or the big picture of the subject. The body is going to describe and tell the function of the parts, while the conclusion will repeat that big idea, the definition or big picture of the subject again. So those 3 parts, introduction, body, conclusion, are the same as our other types of writing for information, but the contents of them are different. Hence, we have to teach descriptive writing in its own stage. In stage 8, your descriptive writing can either be 1 paragraph or 3 paragraphs. This is a big point in your students' writing. You may have some students who just stay at the 1 paragraph because they're still developing their skills, and others who you are moving on to that multiple paragraph level. How can you do this? Well, everyone is still going to have an introduction, a body, and a conclusion, but when you're in the introduction, when you have a hook, it may be a simple hook for kids that are at a paragraph level, while children who are moving to the multiple paragraph level, you may have them write a more advanced hook, and then they would start off with their topic sentence, their definition. That would be a paragraph on its own when you have an advanced hook. It's well developed, there's many sentences, so then the introduction would get its own paragraph. When you're at the paragraph level for the body, then the students would have just 3 to 4 different parts of their subject that they're going to describe and tell the function of those parts. While when you go to the multiple paragraphs, 3 paragraphs, the body becomes its own paragraph, meaning that you're going to have many more parts of the subject that you will describe and tell the function. And finally, when we look at the conclusion, students that are at the paragraph level will repeat the definition and have a very simple, snappy ending. But the children who are in 3 paragraphs will repeat the big idea, the definition, but then they will have a well-developed snappy ending. Thus, they would have a paragraph for that conclusion. So I may have students in my room when I'm working at stage 8 who are writing an advanced paragraph with a hook, their topic sentence, the body of details, conclusion, and snappy ending, as well as students in my room who are writing a paragraph for their introduction, a paragraph for their body, a paragraph for the conclusion. And I can still do all this teaching at the same time. As you can see, every time you go up a stage of writing, I keep adding more skills, more skills. Every stage builds on each other. Here's some exciting news. If you have already used my content vocabulary diagrams to front-load students when you have a lot of content vocabulary and you need to give them that vocabulary before you start a unit of study, then you have already been showing them descriptive writing. That's because my content vocabulary diagrams is when you're not only the giver of the information, you're walking students through the steps of how to write a description. That's a front-loading activity that bridges to descriptive writing. This is exciting because every time your students do content vocabulary diagrams, you're not only front-loading vocabulary, you're also showing them how to write a description. Now when we go to these descriptive writing lessons and they already know the information, they now have to take the information they know, sort it out in their brain, and in this case, to write a description. How do I do that? I know what my subject is, but how do I organize it? Well, they follow these steps at stage 8 to write a description. But it's something that you have already been doing previously in your content vocabulary diagram activities. This is great news because you're giving students experience with this type of writing as well as front-loading them with vocabulary. And then when you get to these lessons, it's not like it's the first time they've ever done this. You will see students make that connection. They will realize, hey, these are content vocabulary diagrams. Yes, they are. When you're doing those activities with me, you're actually walking through the steps of writing a description. Now you know all of your information, so you're going to write a description using the same steps, but you're the ones with the information. And now what are we focusing on? The steps. Once you learn the steps, then you can write your own descriptions. So teachers, here's what's important about what I just said. Once they learn the steps, when we first start doing these writing lessons, in this case a stage 8 description, we're all going to be writing the same description together. They will be giving the information, but we will all be writing the same information so we can focus on the steps. Once the year starts moving on and they've done many of these different descriptions, then you will see that the students will then be writing in table groups or in partners or independently on their own. So when you're looking at their writing at the beginning of the year, it'll look similar. And as the year moves on, they will have their own unique writing because they're writing independently. On our first page, we have our chant. Always introduce your lesson with a chant so your students know what they're learning. In this case, it's titled the Advanced Descriptive Paragraph. If your students are ready for multiple paragraphs, then what you're going to say is Advanced Descriptive Paragraphs. You'll just add an S. So you decide when you're doing this chant whether you want to do 1 or 3, or if you just say to the children, Advanced Descriptive Writing. And that's all you have to do. So we have our Advanced Descriptive Writing that we're going to learn. What does that have? It has an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. Wow, it's the same parts we keep learning. Introduction, body, conclusion. Let's find out what's in the introduction for stage 8. Introduction, hook in the reader. Then tell your topic sentence. That's a definition. Make sure you put your fingers out like this, like an equal sign. Who or what is being described? So now you'll write a definition for your topic sentence or give a big picture of your subject. Let's go back and say it again. Introduction, body, conclusion. In the introduction, hook in the reader. Then introduce the topic sentence. That's a definition. Who or what is being described? Body is full of details about that subject. How do I do this? I draw a picture, label the parts, and tell the function of the parts. So we'll go back again. Introduction, body, conclusion. In the introduction, we hook in the reader and introduce the topic sentence. That's a definition. Who or what is being described? Body is full of details about the subject. Who is being described? And we will make those details by drawing a picture, labeling the parts, and tell the function of the parts. Conclusion. Repeat that topic sentence, but use different words and end it with a snap. So we had an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. In the introduction, we're hooking in the reader, then introducing the topic sentence. That's a definition. Who or what is being described? Body. Draw a picture, label the parts, and tell the function of the parts. Those are the details. Conclusion. Repeat that topic sentence, but use different words and end it with a snap. We've told all the parts of the introduction, body, and conclusion. Go to the next page. This page is your at-a-glance teacher page. This has all the steps that you will follow in the lesson. So we have our introduction. Here's our topic sentence, which is going to be a definition. Then we have our body. Here's our hand sign. That's our memory device of how to fill in the body with the details. We are going to draw a picture, label the parts, add fancy words, and tell the function of the parts. In our steps, you'll see that. You're going to draw a picture, label the nouns, adjectives, and then verbs to tell the function of the parts. Finally, we have our conclusion. Repeat that topic sentence, but use different words. And then the last step is to plan our hook and snappy ending. Just a heads up, in the informative explanatory tools section, I go through hooks and snappy endings in detail. All covered in this lesson, but I want you to know that if you want to have a real detailed understanding of hooks and snappy endings and activities and devices that I use to help kids form them, go to the tools section so that you can look at that in detail. There's all of our parts of our lesson for you on one page to follow as the teacher. Let's go to the next couple of pages. First, you will find a checklist. This checklist is for you to use to assess students' writing. After they finish writing, you can use this checklist to see that they have all the elements that you're teaching at this stage 8 level. In this case, we're looking at contents and organization, and it has a checklist of what you should see in your students' writing at this level, as well as sentences, what you should see in their sentences, and finally, mechanics. You have your checklist here to use when you're analyzing their writing. I also have on this page my descriptive paragraph chart. You need to mount some sort of chart for the students to follow through the lesson because the steps are critical. As you can see up here, I have a chart displayed so that students can follow along the steps as I'm teaching them this level of writing. Here's the good news though. You can go back to this video section and find an 8.5 by 14 color chart that you can download with the steps on them. Much easier. Download it, mount it up on the wall for students to follow through the lesson because these steps are what you're really teaching. Once they learn these steps and they know them, they can write independently on their own. Here's our organizer. The top part is the introduction, the middle is the body, and the bottom is the conclusion. At the top, we will have a hook, and then we will have this definition for your topic sentence. In the middle will be your details. That's where you're going to describe and label all the parts and tell the function of the parts of your subject. The conclusion, repeat the topic sentence as well as end with a snap. This will end up either becoming one paragraph or 1, 2, 3 paragraphs, depending on how much information your students are writing for each part. On the next page, you will see a sample organizer where we have our introduction, our body, and our conclusion. So we have our definition on the top, we have our draw the picture, label the parts, describe, and tell the function of the parts in the middle, and then we were repeating our topic sentence using different words. Let's go to the next page to look at our hook and snappy ending, as well as a finished piece of writing. On this next page, what you will see are stems that I used in this particular lesson to help kids create their hooks as well as their snappy endings. On the back of their organizer, so pretend this is the back of their organizer, they drew a hook, then they drew a snappy ending, and they planned their hook and snappy ending on the back side, so the reverse side of their organizer, they planned this hook and snappy ending so that they would go together, almost like a ribbon tying up a present, where the hook and snappy ending are similar to each other. They're interesting, you're pulling in the reader, you're ending your piece of writing with something interesting but very similar to the hook. The hook and snappy ending, in this case, we're beginning with verbs. So we chose a verb, we looked at the context of what we were writing about, and we planned that hook and snappy ending. In our piece of writing, we have our hook right here at the beginning, and then at the end, we had our snappy ending. Please go back to your Stage 8 Teacher at a Glance page. Take out an 8.5 by 11 blank piece of paper so that we can create our organizer on a blank sheet of paper. I always have my organizers on blank paper. You don't want to Xerox off things for children to fill in. Part of learning how to write is for you to take your ideas and learn how to organize them on a blank piece of paper. Let's walk through the steps and write a Stage 8 descriptive piece of writing. Remember, the students and I are doing this together. Eventually, they may be doing this in table groups as partners or on their own, but they are the givers of the information. So we will start first of all. We have our blank sheet of paper and we need to make our organizer. So we need an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. What are we going to do? We're going to draw a line up at the top and a line at the bottom. Now we have our place for our intro, our body, and our conclusion. Let's look at our steps. Step 1 says topic sentence. That's the big idea of the paragraph. And when it's a description, what is it? It's a definition. So we're going to put an equal sign here. Who or what are we describing? The students have been studying about the Statue of Liberty, so we're going to write a description of the Statue of Liberty. Let's go up to our topic sentence. We put our equal sign for the definition. Let's go first of all to the beginning of our definition, and that's our subject. Who or what is this definition about? The Statue of Liberty. Let's write that down. Because it is a proper noun, what do we need to do? We need to capitalize. Statue of is not an important word, so it does not need to be capitalized. The Statue of Liberty. We have our subject, the Statue of Liberty. Next, we need to have a definition. We could just have a simple definition, is a national monument, or our definition could actually be the big picture. When you're describing, you could either start with a definition in the sense of, is a national monument. Let's put that there. Let's write monument. But you can also, in your topic sentence and a description, many times give the big picture. Before you start describing all the parts, have your readers see the big picture. What is it that you're looking at? So we could say the Statue of Liberty is a monument that stands 305 feet. Ooh, let's do that. From bottom to, and then let's write torch up here. Excellent. That's a great big picture so they can see this is a huge statue. Let's go back and let's read our definition. The Statue of Liberty is a monument that stands 305 feet from its bottom to the top of its torch, from its base to the top of its torch. Wow, that sounds great. We now have our topic sentence. Is there anything in this topic sentence that needs to be described? Statue of Liberty. I think I think we'll just stick with Statue of Liberty. But I do notice over here the word monument. What kind of monument are we talking about? National. Excellent. So that way we know in our nation, this is a monument that represents our entire nation of the United States. Let's go back and see if we can read the whole thing. The Statue of Liberty is a national monument that stands 305 feet from its base to the top of its torch. That's a great topic sentence. Where are we heading now? Body. In a description, our hand sign will remind us how to fill in the body. So let's go to our hand sign as that memory device. What are we going to do? Draw a picture. So we need to draw a picture of the Statue of Liberty. Label the parts. So we're going to label the parts that we need to describe and tell the function of. Then what are we going to do? Add fancy words and tell the function of the parts. When we have all of these different parts, we will then have an adjective, the noun, what the part is, and then we will begin with a verb phrase to tell the function of that part. Let's go back up to the top before the adjective. Sometimes we will need to begin with a transition phrase. So many of these different parts will have a transition, adjective, the part, the noun, and then a verb phrase to say the function of the part. There are all of your elements to create a sentence for all the different parts of this, in this case, Statue of Liberty. So we go and we draw the Statue of Liberty. It's not an art project, it's supposed to be a fast sketch. We've drawn the Statue of Liberty. The students and I would be doing this together or they would be doing it on their own, but it's done quickly. As you can see, my Statue of Liberty is definitely a fast sketch. I'm not worried about it being perfect. Now I have to decide, how am I going to describe the Statue of Liberty? We're describing the Statue of Liberty from top to bottom. We decided on a direction. You can go top to bottom, left to right, right to left, bottom to top, inside to outside. You just want to have some sort of way for the reader to build this picture as you're describing your subject. As we look at the top, we need to label what needs to be described. So we're going to go over and say, the torch definitely needs to be described. That's important. Let's look over here. We have the crown. I'm going to write crown, but I think what we're going to do is we're going to describe the spikes on the crown. So I'll circle torch and I'll circle spikes. Let's move down on the Statue of Liberty. Describe her robe and then the tablet that she's holding, and finally the chains at her feet. So we will, in this body, have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different parts of the Statue of Liberty that we're going to describe. Think about when you're differentiating for students. You may have some kids who may just describe a few parts and some who you may challenge to describe a couple of more parts. We've drawn our picture, we've labeled the parts with nouns. What do we do next? We're going to go back and add the function of the parts and add fancy words. So we'll go back up. Let's look at the torch. Let's add some fancy words. What kind of torch? So remember, we're always asking what kind of. What kind of torch is the Statue of Liberty holding? Oh, I think it's important for people to know gold-plated. The gold-plated torch. Excellent. Notice I wrote gold-plated above the noun, above the word torch. Next, I'm going to put the function in the box below torch. So we have our words in the order that we're forming our sentence. What's the function of this torch? How does it work? What does it do? Why is it important? What is it? So we are going to describe the function of the torch. But as you can see, we're going to be describing the torch, spikes, tablets, robe, chains. All these parts of this statue make up the Statue of Liberty, which is a national monument. All of these parts are symbols. They have meaning. As we go through here, we are going to tell the meaning. That's the function of all of these parts. What is the meaning of this torch? What does it symbolize? What if I were drawing a picture of a plant, labeling the parts of a plant, like let's say root? When I tell the function of the root, what does the root do? How does it work? It soaks up nutrients and water to feed the plant. So you're always looking at the function of that part within the context of the information that you're writing. In this case, we're writing about a monument. What does that symbolize for the Statue of Liberty? But a plant would be, what is the function of that part? How does it work? What does it do? This gold-plated torch, as Lady Liberty is holding this in her uplifted arm, this gold-plated torch, what's the symbol of this? What is it symbolizing in Lady Liberty's hand? It's symbolizing a beacon to all the people of the world that this is a country of freedom. So it is a beacon to all the people. So I'm going to just show some people in this bottom box of how this is a country based on freedom. We have our adjective, gold-plated. Our word is torch, and the function is, it is a gold-plated torch that serves as a beacon welcoming all the people of the world to a free country. Excellent. So we have that as our symbol. Let's jump to spikes. What kind of spikes? Well, it's important that they know that these spikes, that there's 7 of them. So we're going to put 7 spikes. Once we do that, what's the function of the spikes? They represent the 7 seas and the 7 continents, meaning that there should be freedom throughout the world. Let's go to the robe. What kind of robe? A flowing robe. Let's put our function. Why is she wearing a flowing robe? Because she is supposed to be the Roman goddess of freedom. Let's go to the tablet. What kind of tablet is she holding in her hand? An important tablet. She has an important tablet of laws clutched in her hand because our country is based on laws. And finally at the bottom, the chains, broken chains. What's the function of those chains? Those chains represent freedom from slavery and oppression. We now have labeled all the parts, described them, and the function of the parts. Let's go back and try to put all this together. And as we do that, let's think about transitions. How can we start these different details? When writing descriptions, sometimes your transitions need to tell the reader where on the subject are you describing. So a good transition phrase would be a where phrase. On top of, nearby, around, off in the distance, surrounding, sticking out, covering. These are some ways to help your reader visualize the part of the subject that you're discussing. We don't always need to use a where phrase, but that is a wonderful way to start a sentence in a description. It's a strategy that you can give students when they're trying to create sentences that smoothly transition from one to another. I like to tell students, it's almost as if you're directing them at the top of her head, in her uplifted arm, covering her body. You're giving them that transition to say, this is where you're at on your subject. You're giving that direction of where to look as they're building this description in their head from the words that you're writing. Let's start with the gold-plated torch. Where is this? In her uplifted arm. So we'll just say in her, and then I'm just going to put uplifted. The Statue of Liberty is a national monument that stands 305 feet from its base to the top of its torch. In her uplifted arm is a gold-plated torch that serves as a beacon of freedom to the world. Let's go to the 7 spikes. We could say sticking out from her crown. Yeah, let's do that. So where? We'll start with the word sticking out. Sticking out from her crown are 7 spikes that represent the 7 seas and 7 continents of the world. Let's go back. This time when we read it, let's start with the spikes and then go to the torch. The Statue of Liberty is a national monument that stands 305 feet from its base to the top of its torch. Sticking out from its crown are 7 spikes that represent the 7 seas and 7 continents. In her uplifted hand is a gold-plated torch that serves as a beacon of freedom to the people of the world. Wow, this sounds great. Now let's go to her robe. How can we transition to this? Where is this robe? Covering her body. Covering her body is a flowing robe because she's the Roman goddess of freedom. That sounded stilted. Let's start it again. Instead of having a transition, who or what are we talking about? The Statue of Liberty. I don't want to say that again, so let's just say she. She is wearing, let's say that. She is wearing a flowing robe because she is the Roman goddess of freedom. Excellent. Much better. So look what I did. Instead of having the transition phrase start that descriptive sentence, I just went straight to the subject. Who or what are we talking about? Lady Liberty. What about her? She is wearing a flowing robe, and then I went to the function because she is the Roman goddess of freedom. Excellent. Let's go to the tablet. An important tablet. Where is the important tablet? Clutched in her left hand. So let's put that. Clutched in her left hand is an important tablet representing laws. So let's put representing here of a free country. Let's put free. Excellent. So we started with the transition saying where. Clutched in her left hand. What are we talking about? Is an important tablet representing laws of a free country. What's the function of that tablet? It's representing how we have laws, and in a free country, you have to have laws. Excellent. Let's go to the bottom where we have our broken chains. Where are these broken chains? They're at her feet. So let's write at her feet. At her feet are broken chains. And what's the function of these chains? Broken chains that symbolize freedom from slavery and oppression. Excellent. We have all of our details in the middle with transitions, descriptive words, the noun telling us the part that's important on this subject. Below each noun is a drop box that tells the function of that subject. And in this case, many times what that part of the Statue of Liberty symbolizes. Before we go to our conclusion, our hook and snappy ending, let's go back and orally rehearse this. Notice I'm not saying it the same way. I'm looking at the ideas and I'm just going through and I'm revising, practicing, figuring out how I'm going to say this. This is what the students and I do. We are going to keep repeating this over and over. The revisions, how we make our sentences better, are through this rehearsal. Through the rehearsal, we can keep changing, adding, deleting, fixing parts through whether it sounds right or we need to add more information. Start. The Statue of Liberty is a national monument that stands 305 feet from its base to the top of its torch. Sticking out from its crown are 7 spikes that represent the 7 seas and 7 continents of the world. In her uplifted hand is a gold-plated torch, serving as a beacon of freedom to all the people of the world. She is wearing a flowing robe because she is the Roman goddess of freedom. Clutched in her left hand is an important tablet representing the laws of a free country. At her feet are broken chains, symbolizing freedom from slavery and oppression. We've orally rehearsed our introduction with the topic sentence, our details in the body. Let's go to the bottom. In the bottom is our conclusion where we will repeat the topic sentence using different words. Make our equal sign. Go back up here. The Statue of Liberty. I don't want to say the Statue of Liberty again. What's another way that I could say this? I could say this national monument, but I also set it up there. What if we said this national treasure? Where did we get national treasure? From our reading, when we were learning about the Statue of Liberty, we learned that this was a treasure in our country. We see this as a national treasure. So let's use that as the subject of our conclusion. This national treasure Go back up here to, what did we say up here? National Monument stands 305 feet from bottom to top. So up here, what I did was I gave you a big picture. I said it was a national monument, but I gave you the big picture of how it stands. So on the bottom, I could repeat that big picture about how big it is. I don't need to do that though. That wouldn't make sense. So I think I will just say a quick definition. This national treasure represents liberty in the United States of America. We have our topic sentence, our details, our conclusion. From there, we need to plan our snappy ending. When we plan our snappy ending, we're going to turn our paper over, and on the back side, we will draw our hook and snap, and we will plan that so that the hook and snappy ending tend to go together, and we can plan them at the same time. Let's plan our hook and snappy ending. Turn your paper over. So on the reverse side of your paper, you're going to draw a hook and then you're going to draw a snappy ending. In this case, what I did was I gave the students some verbs. There's many different techniques that you can use to plan your hook and snappy ending. Sometimes I will just give them one technique because this tends to be a little difficult to plan these parts of your paper. In the first part, the hook, I gave them 3 verbs: imagine, marvel, and admire. And I said to them, use these verbs, choose one to hook your reader in. Let me give you an example. I'm going to go to imagine. Imagine a piece of art that welcomes every person in the world to the United States of America. Wow. So what did I do? I used the word imagine. I visualized the Statue of Liberty. What does it mean? The Statue of Liberty means liberty. People come and see it from all over the world. And I took those ideas and then I used the word imagine. So let me go back again. What am I talking about? The Statue of Liberty, how it symbolizes freedom to all the people of the world. So I start talking about what this means, and then I'm going to use the word marvel. Marvel at a statue that is more than a piece of art. Excellent. Let's go to admire. Admire freedom in a piece of art. Excellent. So I talked about what the Statue of Liberty means. I talked about this description. Then I took a beginning word. I wrote down those words. The students then will choose the one they want to start with. Let's say that we have a student who has decided on imagine. They will discuss this with their buddy. They will go over and over discussing how they're going to say their hook. Imagine a piece of art representing freedom to the entire world. Imagine a beautiful statue that permeates with freedom. Imagine a beautiful statue that is covered with meaningful symbols of liberty. Wow. Imagine a gigantic statue welcoming the people of the world, but also covered with symbols of freedom. That student now has been practicing how to say the hook, and they would write out the rest of that sentence. If it's a simple imagine gazing at a piece of art, there we have a simple sentence. Or I may have someone who has a more expanded hook, who may be a 3-paragraph writer, where maybe they're going to write 3 sentences, 2 or 3 sentences for their hook. Imagine a piece of art welcoming every human being in the world to a land of freedom. That art not only is beautiful, but is covered with symbols of liberty. That student would have an expanded hook. There's our example, and they would then write it out on their paper. Next, we have our snappy ending, and I'll give them a few verbs. Boys and girls, let's use the verbs discover. Let's use the word wave. Let's use the word journey. We will take our idea up here where we were saying, imagine a piece of art welcoming the world. On the bottom is our snappy ending. We want to connect it to this, but we also want to have that snappy ending tell our reader why this is important. After they've finished with this entire description, we want to leave them with some sort of a snappy, cute ending or snappy, why is this important ending? So I could go back up here and say, wow, we began with imagine a piece of art welcoming the world to the United States of America. At the end, what are we going to say? Discover. What could we talk about? After we've written about all the parts of the Statue of Liberty, we're going to have the reader discover something. So maybe we could say something like, discover the beauty of freedom represented in this statue. Wow, that's excellent. Or wave hello to Lady Liberty. I bet she'll wave back to you. That sounds great. What about the word journey? Journey to this spectacular statue and experience the freedom she symbolizes. The students will talk about their snappy ending after they decide what verb they're going to start with and they've connected that to their sentence, then they write it out below. In this case, the verb journey was chosen. Journey to this spectacular statue and experience the freedom she symbolizes. We have our introduction with a hook, our body, our conclusion with the snappy ending. Let's begin on this reverse part of the organizer and make sure that we have all of our punctuation. So we're having our capitals, imagine a piece of art welcoming the world. Okay. Journey to this spectacular statue and experience the freedom she symbolizes, period. So I have my capitals, my periods. One other thing I need to do here is I need to draw a yellow line above the word imagine on the hook, because that yellow line is reminding me when I go to write as the writer that I need to indent. This is where I'm going to start because it's my hook. So I would be reading this hook. I would see the yellow line, knowing indent as I write on my line paper. Then I'm going to flip my paper over, read my organizer on the reverse side. Then when I get to the bottom and I finish with my conclusion, I reverse it back to this side and read my snappy ending as I write everything out. So I begin with the reverse side for the hook, turn it over, read and write the rest of the paragraph, turn it back again for the snappy ending. I had put a yellow line above the hook on the reverse side to show that's the beginning of your introduction, indent. Start with the hook. Then you're turning the paper over. Here we are back up here on the top where our topic sentence is in our introduction. No yellow line. I don't need to indent there. How many details do I have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's a lot of sentences. So in this example, we're going to put a line right at the beginning of our body, meaning that we're going to have another paragraph we're going to indent when we get to the details. Then at the bottom, we're going to put another line here for our conclusion statement as well as the snappy ending. So in our example, we actually had 3 paragraphs. So we have 3 yellow lines. The yellow line is alerting the student to when the paragraphs need to be indented. So we went through and we drew those yellow lines, plus we are taking our red pencil and we are putting our capitals and our periods, commas, any of our capitalization or punctuation that needs to be put on our paper. We started with the, so we're going to put the. I'm going to trace over statue and liberty so that I remember to capitalize those. The Statue of Liberty is a national monument that stands 300 feet tall from its base to the top of its torch, period. In her uplifted hand is a gold-plated torch that serves as a beacon of freedom to the people of the world, period. So as we read our sentences, we put our capitals and our periods at the beginning and end of each one of these. We went back, we kept rereading it, forming our sentences, making sure that we marked where the capitals and the stops, the end of the sentences were, so that when we go to write, we already have that on our organizer. Many students start writing, they forget where their capitals and stops go. Put it on the organizer. As you go back and read it, mark those capitals and stops. Our organizer is complete with all of the information. All of the information is organized so that we can write it out in a comprehensive and cohesive manner when we're writing our description. We also have 3 yellow lines, and the reason for that is because this will become 3 paragraphs. Now the students are going to orally rehearse their whole paper. As they're saying it and they have control over their language, I will tell them to write. As they write, make sure they keep talking, because that means they keep going back, rehearsing their paper, saying it, revising it until it sounds good, and then they write it down. Students who have difficulty with language, you can pull them in a small group and have them orally rehearse their organizer before they go to writing. Students at this level may just be writing a paragraph. Maybe their hook was short and their snappy ending was short. So this would just be a paragraph, and maybe they just have a few details in the middle. So they're at the paragraph level. While the more expanded organizer with a much lengthier hook, snappy ending, and many more details, we ended up making into 3 paragraphs. In your classroom at this point, some students are at the paragraph level, some are jumping to multiple paragraphs. This way you can differentiate not just by pulling kids who need help with oral language, but also with from single to multiple paragraph level. I hope you enjoy your descriptive writing. Please follow the steps, have the kids master them so they can independently write descriptions on their own.